Let's talk about Wendell and Wild, Netflix's latest stop-frame animated feature from the minds of Henry Selick and Jordan Peele. Peele also stars alongside his old buddy, old pal, Keegan-Michael Key. They play the titular demons here in this bizarre tale. I'm gonna break down and recap key plot details, meaning there will be major spoilers ahead. So, just who are Wendell and Wild? They're demon brothers, the sons of the powerful demon ruler of the Scream Fair in the afterlife, Buffalo Belzer, voiced by Ving Rhames. In the living world, a young girl named Kat loses her parents when their car crashes into a river. Kat carries her demons with her since the accident, but her demons have names. Yep, her demons are Wendell and Wild. Kat has a bit of an issue with rules and regulations, often spending time as an imprisoned juvenile. However, after 5 years, she passes the part of the bridge where her parents crashed and it's still not really fully repaired, wondering who the local council is there, but anyway, she winds up at RBC Girls, a special school for troubled girls, where she becomes a part of a clunky gang of ragtags. So, before continuing the plot, up until this point I quite like the animation here. It looks distinct with all of the characters having exaggerated features, and the colour palette is quite unusual too. It's not dark and gloomy like a Tim Burton, or a bright and colourful affair like a Wes Anderson. It's somewhere in the middle. I enjoy the design of the demon world, even if it lends itself a decent amount to The Nightmare Before Christmas, a film that has been compared to this one since its release. I also get some Coraline vibes here too, not just because of the animation, but because of just how weird the world is. I didn't really think it was an amazing, quirky kind of weird. It was rather all over the place weird for me. The threads of the story unravel rather suddenly, and additional lore is presented at breakneck speed. Cracking on with the plot, it turns out that Kat is a Hell Maiden who is able to summon Wendell and Wild to the living world. Wendell and Wild approach Kat because they have a dream of creating their own dream fair to rival their father, Belzer, creating it in the living world. However, to gain manifestation, they need Kat to summon them. In return, they promise to revive her dead parents, yet that's something they lie about in order to get their way into the living world. However, their father has this magical hair cream which can revive the dead, so Wendell and Wild steal a tube for their escapades on the surface. The overall plot here is fairly straightforward up till this point, but it's here where more gets thrown onto the pile. There's an evil company called Klax Corp who wants to be a kind of chain of prisons and wants to take over RBC Girls. To do so, they murder the father who runs it, and then Wendell and Wild promise to resurrect their old guards in return for the money to build their dream fair. By this point, I was really hating Wendell and Wild. They're utter scumbags. They're just so self-centered and constantly make all these promises before going back on their word. Not only were they insufferable, I even thought Kat wasn't the most engaging protagonist ever. Because of her backstory, she's really chippy, often throwing verbal blows in all directions, and I understand that she's a troubled kid with a horrible backstory and is a punk rocker girl. She's got character traits that reflect her being an outcast, but she's less of a lovable rogue and more of an annoyance really. In fact, I couldn't really get behind anyone here. If there was one standout character for me, I'd probably say Raoul, who seems like he's genuinely a nice person, having transitioned from Ramona, yet the girls at the college are still struggling to adjust to her new identity. And generally, Raoul was actually the most helpful and proactive character for me here. There were an awful lot of characters though, and more kept getting added. There's a weird guy in a wheelchair named Manberg who looks a bit like Marlon Brando, and he's got all of Belzer's lost children in jars and exchanges them back to Belzer. Oh, it was just an extra subplot that didn't do an awful lot. That's how most of this film felt to me. It was rather too many ideas thrown into a blender. It looked lovely, but it didn't offer up much by way of a tactile, watertight story. Anyway, Kat's parents do get resurrected and they reunite, and this should be a really big moment given the emotional importance, yet it's downplayed quite heavily. Even Kat's reaction seemed very underplayed considering it's something she's always wanted. Pretty much all the characters here didn't act with any normality, though that's probably down to the writing wanting to push perceived abnormalities in people and explore them, which is fine, but you'd have to read quite deep into the film in order to extract that rather than it being symbolically meaningful and closer to the surface. I think the main problem this film has is it has so many different ideas being exploited at once that it was a bit like a memory game trying to keep track. Now and again I'd see a certain character reappear and go, oh yeah, you're in this, but hang on, what's your plan again? The resolutions don't come to their conclusions with a lot of clarity or substance. Like, how does Clack's corp get overthrown? There's a little bit of driving around protesting and then the evil corporates get thrown into a police car, and that's it. Wendell and Wild don't even play a very prominent part in the film. It doesn't really feel like there's a main character. Technically, yeah, it's Kat, but there's far too many other characters here that drown her out. Given the ingredients and the initial premise of the film, Wendell and Wild had rather a lot of promise for me. I did really like the soundtrack to the film, with some great song choices, especially Belzer being summoned to Cult of Personality. I was expecting to hear, "It's clobbering time" right there. Other than that, its visuals are quite striking, the animation is solid, and I am a big fan of odd little films. This one certainly is odd, but it goes a bit overboard where my boots were too full with oddness. Too many moving parts and a lack of a clear direction were what made this film pretty lackluster for me. It's a shame because I do generally like the stuff Monkey Paw produces. Perhaps I had an expectation going into this film that was unlike anything I hoped for, so it lessened the experience. Maybe it's my fault I didn't enjoy Wendell and Wild, but equally it doesn't inspire me to retread my steps with a rewatch to see if my opinion differs. Sadly, you can't win them all, but that's the whole point of Honest Review. I'm just a regular guy who watches stuff. I like what I like and don't what I don't. Regardless, I always love to hear what you lot thought of everything we review, so I'm super interested to hear your thoughts on Wendell and Wild. Get them in the comments below and we'll have a chat. Did you really love this film, or feel underwhelmed by it like myself? Either way, I've been Connor from Unleash the Ghouls. If you did enjoy this video, regardless of my opinions, then a cheeky sub would be much appreciated to help the growth of the channel. And we shall see you next time for another Honest Review. Cheers out!